Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on a Tuesday night. And as we come on the air tonight, another extraordinary scene unfolding in several cities across this country. Protests underway. This is the 8th night of protests, demonstrators demanding justice and change in this country after the death of George Floyd. The protests peaceful today, but there is concern with nightfall now approaching. Here in New York City, thousands are in the streets, several marches, one massive group, it's now believed, headed to Gracie Mansion, the mayor's residence. A new 8 p.m. curfew in place now. It is quickly approaching after last night's 11 p.m. curfew was hardly effective. It's believed tens of thousands are on the march in Los Angeles at this hour, several different locations. In Washington, D.C., as we come on, thousands, it's believed, now headed toward the Lincoln Memorial. There is a massive march and rally in Houston tonight, George Floyd's hometown. And of course, all of this comes as authorities brace for the night ahead. Last night after dark, a violent turn here in New York City. Many storefronts destroyed, famous landmarks too. The famed Macy's department store, as I mentioned tonight, that curfew has now been moved up. 6 police officers shot overnight, 4 of them in St. Louis. They all survived. 2 officers in Las Vegas. One of them is now on life support. And tensions high again tonight in Washington, D.C. after Park Police cleared those peaceful protesters with flashbangs, one striking a cameraman from Australian TV. That image was being fed live back to Australia. Broadcasters there were stunned. Minutes later, after that scene, the president walking through the park to St. John's Episcopal Church to hold up a Bible. Asked if it was his, he said, "It's a Bible." Tonight, the fallout from that moment and the competing images, the peaceful protests across the country, and the concerns about what this nation saw overnight when the sun went down. ABC's Stephanie Ramos leads us off again tonight from right here in New York.
Today, the images of protest from across the country just hours before new curfews go into effect. From San Francisco to Orlando to New York City, thousands marching in protest with a message of peace.
We are not looking to agitate or to loot or destroy anything. We are trying to make the community unified, and by doing that, it's not unifying the community, it's breaking it apart.
The city now moving up its curfew to 8 o'clock tonight after a 4th night of looting. Peaceful demonstration by day replaced with a vicious cycle of violence overnight. Windows smashed, stores ransacked from the Macy's flagship store to Rockefeller Center.
The sun has gone down here in New York City, and there are clearly different groups that are out here facing off with police, shattering windows here along 5th Avenue.
The governor today blasting the mayor and police department.
The police in New York City were not effective at doing their job last night, period.
Hundreds of arrests, most after curfew. Police investigating this video showing a car slamming into an officer in a hit and run in the Bronx. That officer in serious condition.
It appears to be quite purposeful. That's unacceptable.
Overnight, officers shot during violent protests in Las Vegas, one in grave condition. Another 4 officers were shot in St. Louis.
Thank God they're alive. They're alive. But what? Can we make some sense out of this?
Across the country, police tactics under scrutiny. LA's police chief sparking outrage after suggesting looters were as responsible for George Floyd's death as those fired police officers.
We didn't have people mourning the death of this man, George Floyd. We had people capitalizing. His death is on their hands, as much as it is those officers.
The chief later apologizing, calling his own words terribly offensive. Today, LA officers kneeling with protesters at a faith-based march. In New York, the police chief also taking a knee.
Let New York show the country how this is done.
At times, police torn between patrol and protest. This officer in D.C. seen trying to kneel, only to be repeatedly pulled to his feet by his fellow officers. In Detroit, 16-year-old organizer Stephen Perez has been urging his fellow demonstrators to abide by the city's curfew.
But they home safe. They don't got rubber bullets. They don't got tear gas. They're not dead.
The mayor calling to thank him.
And I saw your leadership. I have tears in my eyes. You are everything that's special about the city of Detroit. We're going to fight this injustice because of people like you.
That young protester telling others to go home at curfew. Stephanie Ramos back with us here in New York. We see the large crowd behind you, Stephanie. We also know that curfew now goes into effect just a short time from now, 8 p.m., but a lot of protesters said they're not concerned about that.
That's absolutely right, David. There are thousands of people marching across the streets of New York City. You can see them here. It will be very difficult to enforce this new curfew. This group, we've been following them for several blocks. They actually just got started a little while ago.